You know, we as a player base often give Wizards a lot of guff for some of their more questionable design decisions and some of the ways they choose to market and merchandise their new sets and what and why they choose to ban or not ban, but we could go on all day about that. What Wizards actually deserve some credit for is some of their little flavorful touches, and one thing that I think they're especially good at is fear. Not the card, but just the basic concept of fear. They've illustrated it in tons of ways over the last quarter of a century now. You've got your more common basic fears like big nasty spiders and spooky clowns and whatnot, but you've also got giant existential eldritch horrors and whatever this freaky thing is. But what scares me the most is the rats. And by the way, these are 100% true facts. In real life, your boy is completely unnerved by rats, and for good reason. They're filthy, they'll give you a 0 when the health inspector drops by, that's for sure, and they did cause the near total wipeout of an entire civilization's worth of people, and in fact, almost an entire time period's worth of people, and don't tell me it was the fleas. The rats carried the fleas, it's still kind of the rat's fault. They're also, by the way, smart enough that they should make you nervous, and that's probably the scariest thing about rats. Just look at this little rat dunking a basketball, and you might say, oh, that's cute, but it's actually terrifying. So today, let's go through a spoopy deck tech on Spoopy Day, and as a matter of fact, by the time this comes out, it might be a little bit after Spoopy Day, but who cares? Halloween should last all year, it's the best holiday, and this is easily the scariest tribe we can play in Standard right now, so let's get to it. Black-red rats. What's up, my wizards? It's Dev and Ziggy from Mtg. We like it a magic, and I'm Yu Narukami for Halloween. I was trying to find my red shirt with the star on it. I was going to be Steven Universe, but I couldn't find it anywhere, so it gave me an excuse to wear my Yu shirt. But, you know, it's not really much of a costume, I guess. But I can do this. Persona. See? Now I'm Izanami. Pretty awesome. The only problem is now my shirt's on backwards for the rest of the video. So maybe I'll switch back to you at some point. But anyway, now I have to talk about rats, which is awful because, like I said, they are actually horrifying, disgusting, filthy creatures to me. But we'll try to get through it together. Just hold my hand through this haunted house as we talk about red-black rats. Now, Rakdos rats, Rakdos is actually like pretty good for a budget deck. This thing will only run you like 30, 35 bucks right now. And honestly, I was more than impressed with this thing's performance level on Arena. When I first threw this thing together, I was like, oh, we're just going to do this for Halloween. But actually, I've kind of taken a liking to this deck at this point. I'm a little surprised by how good Piper of the Swarm is. This is actually like our only rat payoff, the Pied Piper. Not the Pied Piper of R&B, that's actually way scarier, right? But this is pretty scary in its own right, too. If you're actually able to get a turn or two just like making rats, that's kind of good enough. Some of the time, just making extra bodies is kind of decent. But once you actually get to 3 rats, being able to just take a creature is kind of broken. That's really ridiculous. If Piper of the Swarm actually stays out long enough to make that a reality, it's pretty sweet. And you don't have to just get rats off of Piper. There are plenty of ways in this deck to plunk down a Piper of the Swarm in the late game, and then if you're actually able to untap with the next turn, you just immediately steal something. But just an everyday application, if you're not like comboing off or anything, it's still nice to just be able to like block a 2-power guy with your 1/3 and then make a rat, or just make a rat to block their big guy or whatever every turn. Like, there's actually a lot of really decent applications for this in the format. Who would have known that a decently statted, in terms of defense at least, you know, Creature Factory would be a decent card? It turns out it is. And I'm actually going to start looking at this in the 2-drop slot in some black decks because, you know, there's a lot of these mono black, like aggro and mid-range decks. We've been talking about how poor the 2-drop slot is in that deck. But after playing with it, I think Piper actually kind of deserves a second look. But obviously, the best thing this thing does is steal creatures every now and again. And to make sure that we do that as often as possible, we're also going to play 4 copies of Mad Ratter, who is rat insane, I like to say. This is actually not bad either, especially with some of the other stuff that we're playing in this deck. I've seen a bunch of people, especially in Draft, where Mad Ratter is actually kind of an actually insane card. I've seen a lot of people try and do, Opt and Thrill of Possibility and Foreboding Fruit and all kinds of stuff like that with this card to make sure that you can get at least a couple of rats off of it here and there. But in this deck, we're playing Thrill of Possibility. We're playing some of those cards, but there's also a bunch of really interesting ways to draw your second card for the turn that I don't feel have been explored enough and go really, really well in this deck with Mad Ratter. Now, one of those ways to draw that second card on your turn that you might not have thought of yet is Priest of Forgotten Gods. This works really well with Mad Ratter in a number of ways. If you've already made a couple of rats with Mad Ratter, that's excellent sacrifice fodder for Priest. But if you're able to sacrifice a couple of creatures while you have Mad Ratter and Priest out and it's your turn, then presumably you've drawn your second card of the turn. You get 2 more creatures to sacrifice next turn. So you just get a near guaranteed Priest of Forgotten Gods activation just about every turn, as long as you're able to set this sort of combo up. And Priest can work pretty well with Piper too, because Piper's just pumping out rats for you. If you don't have the time in a given game, the number of turns that you might need to get to 3 rats and sacrifice them to actually steal something, but you've got 2 rats due to a Piper of the Swarm, well, Priest of Forgotten Gods can sack those 2 rats and go ahead and emergency, get one of your opponent's creatures off their side of the table, and that's important too. Plus, this generates mana, they lose life to it, so you don't even have to attack to win the game. Just Priest has always been an awesome card, but it's especially sweet with our 2, rat token producers. Now, I'm also playing 3 copies of Midnight Reaper, which doesn't work with tokens, but still works well enough that we'll definitely play it in this deck to try and draw that second card, either on our turn or on our opponent's turn. And we've got a Mad Ratter out, and we lose 2 non-token creatures in combat while we also have a Midnight Reaper out. Well, we just get 2 rats off of that interaction, which is pretty sweet. Midnight Reaper is one of the better ways in this color combination, at least, of being able to get rats on your opponent's turn. That said, it's pretty easy to draw your second card on your turn with the Midnight Reaper too. Just draw for the turn, send some guys into combat, and you don't care if they die or not, because if a non-token creature does die in combat, you draw your second turn, you get 2 rats to replace the dude that died. So it's actually a pretty sweet deal either way, and even though Midnight Reaper, just like Priest, is like $2.53, driving up the cost of the deck a little bit, it's more than worth it. Oh, and by the way, before I get off this card, I should mention that, just like Priest of Forgotten Gods, this is a great way to draw cards to make sure that you actually get the pieces of the quote-unquote combo that you need. Every combo deck needs a card draw engine, and we've got a couple of really reliable ones. But since this deck is red-black, I had to put Mayhem Devil in it. I mean, this is Halloween-themed. It's a devil. It seems to work, but this is just awesome with all the stuff we're doing in the deck. Sacrifice 2 creatures to Priest of Forgotten God. That's 2 pings, plus whatever your opponent sacrifices also gets us a ping off of Mayhem Devil. We sacrifice 3 rats to Piper of the Swarm. We get to steal something and ping 3 times. We can just blow up the opponent's entire board and steal their best creature. Sometimes kill a Planeswalker too. Just whoo, Mayhem Devil is just so crazy in this deck. We're sacrificing stuff, our opponent is sacrificing stuff, so yeah, Mayhem Devil is a great way to speed up the clock and control the board. Now, I'm also playing 4 Foulmire Knight in this deck for a couple of reasons. This can draw you your second card on your turn, and that's nice, or even just draw you your second card on your opponent's turn. You lost a creature, you had a Midnight Reaper out, you're already drawing 1 card on your opponent's turn, well, boom. There it is. Just Foulmire Knight Adventure Half. And suddenly you get 2 rats off of that deal, which is pretty sweet. But this is also an early creature that can hold down the ground for you. Even against like really big stuff, this can scare them out of attacking some of the time, and that's nice. Plus, it's just easy sacrifice fodder if you need to sacrifice a creature to a priest. So lots of reasons for Foulmire Knight to be here. Just a good value creature in its own right, too. Now, I'm also on 3 Thrill of Possibility here. It was 2 at first, but it turns out that being able to make rats on your opponent's turn is actually kind of absurdly powerful, because you can ambush them with rats when they go into attack and stuff, and sometimes just make them think twice about attacking at all, for that matter, because you can just take down like 2 toughness creatures if you're able to make 2 rats when they go to attack, and that's actually really important to be able to do, so we pumped it up to 3 copies of Thrill of Possibility, which also helps us find important cards. Not only do we want to find important cards, we want to keep our opponent off of important cards if we possibly can, so I'm playing 4 copies of Burglar Rat. That's right, we're actually playing real rats, not just tokens. There are some rats in Standard, so might as well play them. This is actually a pretty decent 2-drop if you miss your Piper or something like that. Being able to make your opponent discard a card is actually fairly desirable, especially if this is after turn 2, but like before turn 6. You know, there's a sweet spot where this card will sometimes make your opponent discard their last card, and that's always a really nice deal, especially if they're holding on to something that they'd really like to cast at some point that game. So I've always been like slightly impressed by Burglar Rat, and I think it gets a bad rap. It's not a bad card in and of itself, and since it's on tribal theme, we kind of have to play it one way or the other. Now, I've also worked in 2 copies of Chittering Witch, which costs more than I want it to. It's like $1.50, even $2 sometimes for this card right now, but that's because it's fairly scarce in terms of like quantity and availability. You know, it's in the Brawl decks. You can't get it out of real packs with Throne of Eldraine, so it's going to cost a little bit more, but it's worth it if you're on a rat tribal theme, and it's a nice piece of removal that also allows you to sacrifice creatures to get triggers off of Mayhem Devil. So there's a lot that Chittering Witch does. It also brings 2 creatures into play immediately. You can sacrifice them to Priest of Forgotten Gods if that's what you're trying to do at that moment. So Chittering Witch does so much, plus it's a nice mana sink and can actually really help keep the board clear. You know, we're making a lot of rats with Piper and Mad Ratter, so this can just function as a mana sink and removal at the same time that can just remove like 2 or 3 creatures from the board in one turn and create a bunch of Mayhem Devil triggers. Just Chittering Witch, a little bit better than I would have thought. But to finish off the main here, I've got 4 copies of Angrass Rampage. Now, not only does this work pretty well with Mayhem Devil, your opponent sacrifices something, you get a ping, but this is also a really good answer to an early game Oko. You know, they hit Oko on turn 2, no big deal, you know, just Angrass Rampage, you sack a Planeswalker, Waka Waka. You know, good job, you know, between Oko and the turn 1 Gilded Goose, plus the breeding pool that you slap down. What is it, $100 and some odd on the table? Have an Angrass Rampage, kid. It's just always a really nice feeling, and making your opponent sacrifice creatures is also pretty relevant in the early game, and sometimes even in the late game, where that Mayhem Devil trigger might actually matter a lot. Now here are your lands, 15 black, 13 red, fairly easy right there, and we've gone as budget as we possibly could with this mana base. But of course, you know, spice it up with things like Blood Crypt, obviously, Castle Locthwain, even Castle Embereth might work well in this deck for pumping all your rats up to double their normal power. That seems nice, plus Fabled Passage could go in here. It goes very nicely with Mayhem Devil, so there's all kinds of ways you could zhuzh up this mana base if you wanted, but this has been working for me. Now, I've been playing this deck in Best of 1, and it's really more of a budget meme deck than anything, no matter how much it impressed me. But just in case you did want some ideas for the sideboard, there is obviously Noxious Grasp. This is actually main deckable, as has been illustrated plenty of times over the last week and a half here in the standard environment. So you want to play all 4 copies of this. But there's also Duress, Bedevil. There are all kinds of options in black and red for the sideboard, and I leave it up to you in your local F&M meta, or your local kitchen table meta, school cafeteria meta, whatever, you know, to determine what's best for your sideboard if you're playing best of 3 games. Now, here are your power rankings. You may notice they're a little bit different than usual because I can't really score sideboard. Again, I've been playing this deck in Best of 1 on Arena, and I have made the deck in paper. So I played some kitchen table games. It's not a really hard deck to put together. It's fairly cheap, and I've already got all the cards for it. So I played some games both digitally and analog, IRL, with this deck, but I haven't actually played with the sideboard at all. That said, the sideboard options are wide and very powerful, so I imagine the deck could perform very well with a board. But as it is, the power rankings stand at 51, which is very high for a deck that's missing an entire category. So keep that in mind. 51 ain't half bad for a deck that's only about $30-35 right now, especially if you futz with some of the numbers. But you probably shouldn't. You want to play all 4 copies of Priest, and you at least want the 3 Midnight Reaper, at least to my mind. Now, like I said, the deck, it can perform admirably under the right conditions. You know, it's not going to do super well against a lot of the huge powerhouse decks in the format right now, but occasionally you can snipe an Oko with, you know, an Angrass Rampage in the early game, actually set up a Mad Ratter and then start going to town. It has happened, but for the most part, this deck just barely falls short of a lot of the big meta decks. And if you're going to really build a Rakdos Sacrifice deck, you should probably go all the way and build the Cat Food combo deck. That said, if you've got limited funds, like a lot of us do, then you might want to check out this version. If only for the memes. If you like fun decks, this is a really good one. It'll take you a lot farther than the average, you know, standard budget meme deck will. And I'm telling you, even though it takes a little bit to get set up, you feel like a sewer king when you actually get the combos in this deck together, because there are combos, plural, many of them, you know, almost no matter what 2 cards you have out. They work with one another in some way or another. Plus, I'm telling you, for no other reason, you want to play this deck just to try out Piper of the Swarm. I'm telling you, the card deserves a second look. It's better than you might think. And to finish things off here, I just want to apologize if you can hear my computer. It's making a rattling noise every 5 seconds, which is probably the hard drive. If you want to support the channel, patreon.com/SBMTG. Every dollar counts. I really hope my computer doesn't die. So that's happening. But if you can hear it, then I apologize. We'll try and get that cleared up soon. It's just act right, buddy. I'm looking at it. It's right there. I'm looking at it right now. Staring at it, making noise, and it just won't stop. Apparently, you can't stare down a computer and it does what you want it to do. But anyway, I think that's pretty much it for this one. I hope you enjoyed this spoopy Halloween deck tech. I never switched my shirt back around. I'm still wearing a backwards shirt. But anyway, I hope you like this, and I hope you give it a shot if you got a chance to do it. You know, link in the description if you want to check out the deck list on TCG Player. Pick up any pieces that you need, because it is a great casual deck, and it might even be a decent F&M deck in some metas. I'm telling you, you get everything set up, and it's really, really difficult to beat, but you got to get everything set up. So keep that in mind. But one way or the other, it is a fun deck, especially when it actually gets going. So if you give it a shot, rats off to you. If not, I understand that too. But I will have some gameplay with the deck up in the next couple of days, and I've got a bunch of content coming out too. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, especially if you're new around here. Make sure you get all the premium contents and such. But aside from that, just like the video if you got the time, make sure you share it around if you can or you want it. Does anybody share videos anymore? I don't know. But anyway, do it if you want to. And yeah, hit up the Patreon at patreon.com/SBMTG. Help out around here. $1 a month is all I ask. You get to participate in polls to vote on what decks you want to see and whatnot. So pretty wild ride. Do it if you got $1. It's really not too much to ask. And I think I need a new computer. So yeah. But anyway, I'm pretty sure that's it. I've been Dev from the place. I'm going to go give out candy to trick-or-treaters, hopefully. We just moved into this house. I don't know if we even get trick-or-treaters or not. We have a huge bowl of candy that costs money, so I hope we get trick-or-treaters. But anyway, I've been Dev from the place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind. Oh, but we ain't out this piece just yet. I got to talk to Samuel Isaac Gunn. You've been a patron for a really long time. A super long time, it feels like. I see your name all the time. You're everywhere in my life. Not really. I do see your reply a lot to the Patreon post, and that's really sweet. I like that engagement, son. So keep that up, and I really appreciate your support. All of your dollars are going to go straight to this new tower. Does anyone call it a tower anymore? Showing my age, to this new desktop. Do people call it that anymore? I'm not actually sure. What's the new 2019 terminology for a PC? Do you say PC? Have we shortened it to that at this point? Or are we good with that? Anyway, Samuel Isaac Gunn, Siggy. Hope you. That's almost your name, buddy. But anyway, Siggy. Hope you enjoy the content, and thanks for being my patron, my ratron on Ratreon.